So welcome everyone, I'm Philip, and today we're going to talk about the real Web3, building, learning, and thriving as a solo dev in the Web3 space. So a little bit about me. I'm Philip, I'm 22 years old. I'm a full tech nerd, and I work as a Web3 solo dev in the blockchain space. I'm super passionate about Web3, and let me just explain the word solo a little bit more. So what that means is I have no formal education. I'm fully self-taught. I didn't even attend a tech high school, went to a normal high school, and I went through my coding journey completely solo, without help from anyone else. And that's what I want to share with you guys today. I want to take this opportunity to share my journey with you, walk you through why I'm so passionate about Web3, what Web3 is about, and what I'm working on. And I would also like to show you what it's like to take it solo and why you can do it too. So a little bit about my coding journey. I started coding when I was 11. I basically started with web development. And the first project I did, and I'm still super proud of this to this day, was I developed a cloud platform, sort of like Google Cloud. So you could upload your files and access your files online. And I still remember that. I built that with PHP, HTML, CSS, pretty old frameworks nowadays. And when I was crafting the presentation earlier, I actually found a screenshot of the website on my phone. So this is how it looked like. Pretty simple. You could just upload files, create folders, access it. Yeah, so that's basically where I got started in development, web development. And the main thing why I got started there, and I think that's kind of what sparked my curiosity, was that it's so creative, right? When you do front-end work, you can design, you can be creative, you could put things around, you could try to center a div, and you could do all kinds of different things. And I think what many people scares about coding is like just staring at lines of code and building like abstract architecture things without having anything being displayed. So yeah, that's what sparked my interest. And then as time progressed, I actually enjoyed looking at lines of code without any graphic things more. And I got more and more interested in backend engineering. And that's when I discovered Golang. And I basically dedicated all of my free time to just coding backend with Golang. And my thrive into Golang eventually landed me internships at Web2 companies in my local city. So I did like, I think the first one was like more security focused internship. And then I worked at Dynatrace, which maybe some of you guys are aware of, which is like a software optimization company. And while being so passionate about Go and Golang, I also discovered crypto. And that was back in 2016. I think I was 13 at that point. And I heard about Bitcoin, I heard about Ethereum. And then because I was so interested in the tech side of things, I went ahead and set up my own mining operation at home. And I think some of you guys might be aware of like mining, Bitcoin mining. Basically what it's about is like giving computational resources to the Bitcoin network and to a blockchain network to secure it. And in return, you get fresh Bitcoins. So you get paid in cryptocurrency. And that was pretty interesting. I set up a small operation at home. And then, and yeah, actually funny thing, back then we didn't even have those fancy terms like Web3. It was just called crypto at that point. And yeah, that's sort of how I got started. And then as time progressed, I got more and more interested into the tech. And I also started looking at smart contracts, which Theo briefly mentioned earlier as well. And I'll explain more about that later. But in essence, what smart contracts are is they're basically pieces of code, applications that you can put on blockchains, and then execute in a decentralized environment, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I started coding smart contracts, and then from that point on, I basically never stopped, and I'm still doing it to this day. And then after high school, I basically had two options. I could either do the traditional route, go to uni, do something like software engineering or computer science. But I would not be able to, if I did that, I would not be able to directly pursue my passion, which was Web3 at that point. Because Web3, crypto, smart contract engineering, all of that is very, very novel. And it really lacks university grade academic education. And there isn't really education for that. So the other option was to ditch university, just pursue my passion, and try to make it as a self-taught dev. And I chose the latter, and decided to skip university, don't do any formal education, and dedicate myself full time to building in the space. And yeah, so that's how I got into Web3. But before we talk about that, let's actually tell what is Web3. So Web3 describes anything related to blockchain technology. And as Theo already mentioned at the beginning, blockchain technology is this decentralized network. And what blockchain technology is actually built for is storing data in a decentralized manner. And you might have heard of Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses blockchain technology in a very simple way, actually. It just stores a list of transactions. So it just stores a list of, like, Alice sent Bob 5 Bitcoin, and then Bob sent Alice 1 Bitcoin back. And that's sort of how Bitcoin, what Bitcoin is. It's just this list of transactions in a very abstract way. And there are more things to it, like cryptography, which is used to secure the whole network, which is very math heavy. But on a simple level, that's how it works. And there is also Ethereum, which some of you might have heard of. And Ethereum uses blockchain not only to store a list of transactions, but also to store code. And that's where it gets really interesting, because now you can put code into a decentralized network and execute it in a decentralized manner. And that code is called smart contracts. So smart contracts is basically code that lives on a blockchain that anyone can see, is fully open source and public. And anyone can also execute it in this decentralized network. And it runs on, at least in Ethereum, it's called an EVM, which stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. So every node in the network, every computer, runs this EVM, which is an execution environment that is used for running the actual code. And this allows us to build fully decentralized applications. And how this looks like in code is actually not that complicated. So this is a smart contract, a very simple smart contract, and it's written in Solidity. Smart contracts sometimes are written in completely specific languages like Solidity, which is just a pure smart contract language. And Solidity is very similar to C and C++. It uses C syntax. And a smart contract itself, in terms of code, is just a class. As you can see here, it has a constructor, which gets run for the first time that the contract is being deployed to the network. And then it has certain functions that you can execute. And what this contract does, fairly simple, it just has functionality to be ownable, to have an owner. So at the top, it stores an address. Address is a specific data type that lives on a blockchain. And you can think of address as, well, if you think of it in more low-level terms, you can think of it as like memory addresses where data is stored. And this address can be modified using this function, change owner, which only the owner itself can call. So yeah, this contract just has very simple functionality. It has an owner, and the owner can be changed. That's pretty much it. And I wanted to show this to you, especially for the more tech people that might be here in the audience, to show that smart contracts are not overly complicated. The code looks very similar to other languages, and sometimes they are very, very basic. And this piece of code is actually almost in every single smart contract. There is a very, very widely used plugin for smart contracts, which makes it ownable because sometimes you might need admin functionality, right? So if you understand this part, then you understand one of the most crucial pieces that lives on the blockchain and is widely used, actually. So why does it even matter? Why does Web3 blockchain matter? Well, since blockchain allows us to have a decentralized network, it provides us with certain properties. And these properties are that the network is completely permissionless. Anyone in the network can make actions as long as they abide to the rules of the network. The code that lives on that network on Ethereum has deterministic execution. So as long as you abide by the rules of the network, again, you have a guarantee that the code you're trying to execute actually gets executed. So if we go back to this contract, if you code change owner and you fulfill all the rules within this code, which here is that you're actually the owner that is trying to basically change itself to another guy, then you can execute this code and it will be perfectly fine. If you don't, if you're not the owner, if you break one of the rules here, then yeah, it won't work. The third thing is it's completely censorship resistant. Blockchain networks are built decentrally exactly for that. If you have a central server, one server that is running some work, can easily shut it down. Governments can come in, shut it down if they don't like it, and that is pretty much not really feasible with blockchain networks, just because of the fact that they run on millions of computers that are distributed worldwide. They are very privacy focused as well, although that's a double-edged sword because everything that happens on a blockchain, again, depends on the blockchain, but most blockchains is public. But I'm saying privacy because your name is not attached to what you're doing there. You have an alias, which doesn't point to your name at all. So you can act with a high degree of anonymity. And also, those networks are pretty secure, and they're harder to attack, and they have less attack vectors as opposed to centralized systems. As I already mentioned, if there is a centralized server somewhere, if there is a bug in that centralized server, it's way easier to exploit that than a network of millions of computers. And also, if you have a network of millions of computers, you have a way harder time to take over that network or try to pull the blockchain in a certain way, because you would just have to put a lot of computational resources into it, which you would basically have to have more computational resources than the rest of the network. So it's pretty hard to overtake the network and make it malicious. And this enables a couple of different things. So first of all, it allows us to rethink trust. And instead of relying on centralized entities like banks or platforms or governments, we can encode trust into code, into a piece of code that I just showed you. It also allows us to have more ownership of digital assets and identity. For the first time, users can truly own their data, their money, and even their online identity without permission. And another cool thing is that now we have programmable money and finance. And this is actually something that I'm working in, which is called DeFi, which I'll explain later. But in essence, we have no more waiting for a bank API. We can build lending, trading, and asset management logic directly into smart contracts, which are composable and open source. And also, it gives us a high degree of transparency and auditability. Everything that happens on a blockchain network is completely public. So if someone is acting weird or if funds get stolen somewhere, then anyone can track those funds theoretically. So and also every transaction that happens is verifiable and secured by cryptography. Every rule is public, and we in essence have trust through math, not by marketing. So yeah, and that also brings us to another thing that I wanted to talk about. What are the real use cases of Web3? So one of the main aspects of Web3 and how it's utilized right now is, for example, DeFi, which stands for decentralized finance, which is the programmable money I just talked about. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to bring applications from traditional finance onto the blockchain with those cool properties. And so, for example, we have a platform called Aave, which is one of the most prominent platforms in the space, which basically they built a lending and borrowing protocol. So in essence, the business that a bank does now on the blockchain, completely trustless, verifiable, and without needing a banked intermediary. And then, and by the way, these are QR codes which link to the platform, so you can have a look and scan them. One other application that is widely used is Uniswap, which is more of a crypto use case, which allows you to trade tokens. I'm sure every one of you has heard of tokens before, which allows you to trade tokens without needing a centralized intermediary. In the past, there have been certain instances with centralized platforms for token trading. Some of them got hacked. Some of them didn't let their users withdraw funds. It was just, many people didn't like it. And so what Uniswap, for example, is, it's a decentralized exchange, fully built on the blockchain, which allows you to trade tokens without needing to go to a centralized platform and put your trust into a black box. Another area that is pretty interesting are RWAs, which stands for real-world assets. And what this space is basically about is, it's about bringing real-world assets like buildings, cars, anything that is physical, even the camera here potentially, onto the blockchain. And then you can use it in many different ways. And I put an article here if you want to read more about that. But for example, a big use case of this would be mortgages, right? You could put your house as collateral for a loan, which that's how it works in TradFi and traditional finance. Right now, it still doesn't work in DeFi and on blockchain, but with RWA, you could put your house up for collateral and get a mortgage on the blockchain without needing a bank as an intermediary. And the third thing I wanted to talk about, which is more up and coming, is Web3 and the intersection with AI. Again, I put an article there if you're more interested. But in essence, this space is about the intersection of Web3 and AI, bringing AI platforms onto the blockchain, integrating LLMs and making them accessible from within smart contracts. So now you could integrate AI applications into DeFi applications, right? You could put them into lending protocols and use AI for knowledge retrieval. Or you could have entire LLMs put on the blockchain where people can see how models source information, or where they were trained, or how they were trained, right? Because nowadays with most AI applications, we actually have no idea how these applications are built, how they're tweaked, how they might have a certain bias built into them. And Web3 could solve that through data integrity and transparency. So yeah, so much about Web3. Now I wanted to take some time to talk about how it is to build completely alone, right? And to build completely solo. And to be honest, it's not only fun and games, it's a little bit challenging as well. And I want to present some of the challenges that I faced and still face to this day to you. So for example, one of the challenges is that positive feedback takes a while to come. For example, if you just start off coding the solo journey, the point where you land your first gig or your first freelance job is months away, maybe even years, right? So you have to, you're only earning fruits later, which makes it hard to keep putting in effort and consistency. It's also very time intensive. If you don't have someone else or an institution like a university which just tells you what to do, right? Or has this given path that they're giving to you, you have to craft everything on your own, and that takes extra time. It's also not easy, to be honest. Especially in Web3, documentation and good resources are not easy to come by, especially if you're just starting off. Different development areas or different tech areas which are more established have better documentation and resources. But for example, in Web3, it's really scarce. And when I started off, which was a couple of years ago, it was even worse. And there weren't there weren't such good resources, which I'm actually gonna show you some resources later. Yeah, it was really tough. And also, especially in Web3, and this might not apply to every single tech sector, but in Web3 especially, the space is moving fast. It's moving with lightning speed. And you have to keep up with that, because if you don't, you're left behind. For example, dev tooling is really bad, and oftentimes it's buggy as well. And dev tooling and frameworks change rapidly. I've been programming smart contracts since a couple of years now, and I have had, in the course of the last 5 years, I think, worked on 4 completely different development frameworks just for smart contracts. So every every year or so, you have to change completely how you're working, and that might be very annoying for some people. And it's also time intensive again because you have to spend resources and time to learn how to use a new framework, right? And yeah, building alone comes with its own set of real challenges. And over time, I realized that the only way to consistently move forward was to actively shape my mind. And that's what I want to talk to you about now, which is the mindset that helped me push through, stay focused, and actually enjoy the process. So the first thing that you really need as a solo dev is discipline. You don't have a manager, you're on your own, and you're basically your own manager. And there is no one chasing deadlines, right? So you need, like, personal discipline becomes the core operating system for you. Also, I think you need a hustler mindset, but a little bit sustainable, because beware, you could burn yourself out. The grind is real, especially early on. You have to make sure that you're not falling behind, as I already mentioned, and you're basically learning something learning something new every day. You have to keep chasing personal goals, and you're wearing many hats as well, right? Sometimes you're a tester, sometimes you're an architect, sometimes you're a core developer. You have to change fast, and you also have to learn how to fail, but also to stand up afterwards and keep up the momentum, which emotionally is a little bit challenging. Another thing that is really important is having passion as fuel. Without genuine curiosity and passion, I'm completely honest, but it's very hard to stay motivated long term. Passion basically is what makes learning enjoyable and setbacks tolerable. You basically turn obstacles into puzzles instead of roadblocks. And what you also need is rational optimism, believing that with enough time, effort, and iteration, you can and will succeed. Not because of luck, but because of dedication, persistence, and logic. And I think the last thing you definitely need is also to embrace discomfort. Learning to cope with the feeling that you don't know enough, and that you constantly know that you don't know enough, and that has to be the norm. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable is such a huge asset, actually. And you keep learning, you build confidence, and you really build confidence from doing hard things alone. So what's the point of all of this, right? What's the point of going through all the pain I just mentioned? Why do it? Well, there are not only challenges and downsides, there are also upsides. For example, you're in charge of your own learning, and you get ownership out of that. When you teach yourself, you're not following someone else's plan. You decide what you want to learn based on what interests you and what's useful. That kind of freedom helps you stay motivated and builds real confidence. Also, I think you build real-world skills. In Web3, everything is so fast and open source. You can start contributing without permission. There is no one telling you that you can't. Open source project, pretty much everyone can contribute. And everything you learn and build has real impact. And you're not just doing exercises or theory. You're solving actual problems. And you're shipping code. You're working with tools that companies and teams use every day. Also, you get visible results and real feedback. Instead of just grades or scores, your work speaks for itself. You build a portfolio people can use, and your projects can actually get noticed, especially in Web3, where everything is public and open source. Also, I think you learn how to spot and act on opportunities. When you build things, contribute to protocols, and share your journey, people notice. And that visibility often leads to freelance gigs, jobs, grants, contributor roles, or even pretty good job offers. And especially in Web3, where everything is on chain, everything is public, open source proof beats formal education. And the payoff of all of this is that you have purpose and not just a paycheck. It gives you the chance to contribute to something bigger. Open finance, user ownership, or just global accessibility of data. There are systems that actually have could have a real impact on people in the future, and building here can feel truly meaningful. So yeah, and that brings me to my next point. Web3 need builders. We need sharp people, and we need a lot of them. The space is extremely young, it's growing fast. There is a huge need for people who can design, develop, who can question and improve systems. Also people who just want to shape the internet, digital ownership, and work for a better future. Everything is open, as I said, everything is open source, so you can theoretically just start today. You don't need to apply for a job. You can just go to an open source project and contribute there. And there's real meaning behind the work. Web3 is not, I think it's more than a technology. It's about rebuilding digital systems to be more fair, more user-owned, and more resilient. And it's about challenging and rethinking how we organize our values. So yeah, that's my point that I wanted to bring to you. There are a couple really great resources that if you want to get started in Web3, you should check out. One of them is Developer DAO, which is a community of developers that help each other out, help each other get started, and just keep cheering you on. And basically, this community is you give to the community and you get back from the community. And it's a pure Web3 developer community. There is also this guy called Patrick Collins, which Theo already mentioned. He's an amazing guy. He's an amazing Web3 educator. This is his Twitter. He posts tweets very regularly, and he also co-founded Cypher and Updrafts, which is a learning platform for learning coding in Web3 and learning how to code smart contracts. And this is the platform, Cypher and Updraft. So if you really want to get started in Web3, they have tons of amazing courses for smart contract development. And I'm really jealous of that, because when I started off, this wasn't here. And this is really amazing. It's a great resource. They have security-focused programs. They have courses on just normal smart contract engineering. And I think they now also have courses on Viper as well. So not only Solidity-focused. And another really important thing, which helped me a lot as well, is going to hackathons. Because hackathons are a space to learn and to build. And at hackathons, you'll be able to meet like-minded developers, a lot of great minds, and also companies from the space. Web3 companies are sponsoring hackathons, and they're there. So you can just go up to them, talk to them, and you can actually win bounties from them as well. So you can build on top of technologies from those companies, get in touch with them, and then potentially even land a job. So yeah, I think those are some very great starting resources. And also, let's connect. I'll be hanging around. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I can definitely help you out getting started in Web3. And yeah, happy to have great conversations afterwards. Thank you very much. Any question? Yep, sure.
Yeah. You have mentioned it, thank you very much for sharing, man. Very interesting. Enlightening as well. You have mentioned the real world assets. There is something that is surprising me, that when digitalizing, let's say, monetary assets, money, you don't need for these assets to be unique. But you have mentioned, for example, mortgages. And I'm surprised that the NFTs are not being connected with the real world assets. It's something that is kind of forgotten, lost in the limbo, and it's a perfect example for identifying uniquely forever. And there is no connection.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, NFTs were like, I think most people just know them about like ape pictures. And throughout my presentation, I didn't go into meme coins, ape pictures, or even, I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to go into tokens and all of that because that's what people know about crypto and that's what they associate crypto with. But the point here was that I wanted to showcase to you guys what crypto is really about, like on a deep level. But to your question, NFTs are actually being used for that, but no one knows about it. NFTs as an N=1 asset are widely used for technical solutions in smart contracts. People just, yeah, they just know about it as like these pictures, right? Ape pictures. Yeah, for RWAs, they are used because in terms of technical feasibility, it's an amazing tool to facilitate that. So yeah, I mean, NFTs, it's just a smart contract standard, really. So anyone can build on top of that. They're used for tons of different things. One thing that maybe you guys are aware of there is that, for example, every address on a blockchain, at least on Ethereum, can have a name attached to it, sort of like DNS for blockchain called ENS. And those are also NFTs. For example, my public address has a specific name as well that I put to it, and it's an NFT. So, but it's not about being a picture. It's just about like being unique. So anything that is unique or should be unique, yeah, and NFTs are a technical solution for that.
And they are being actually used nowadays.
Yes. Yeah.
The real world. Okay.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Yeah.
On that, I also wanted to mention that they are unique, but they also have different purposes. So, for example, if you could use it as a, because that's what I wanted to do it for my website, for example, as a subscription website, instead of having your subscription, you could have identical subscription NFTs, but they're just distributed to different people, and you just have control over how many there are out there. So you could add like the same subscription onto a bunch of different NFTs, but you just control how many of them there are, and so on, depending on the smart contract behind each of them. The other one on smart contracts I wanted to say is being a smart contract auditor, which is something I forgot to mention. And I think it's very important to say the reason we want more developers is the fact that smart contracts are developed and done, and then they cannot be changed. So you need to find vulnerabilities on them before they're actually deployed, because as soon as they're deployed, they're done. In order to fix a mistake or a vulnerability on those, you just have to go through a hassle of like moving funds from that specific smart contract into a different one. And yeah, that's another one of the reasons why you need professionals in Web3, because you need people to like audit them from the beginning and just make sure that that's correct, it's going on there, and it has no vulnerability on it. Nobody can like crack through the specific contract. It says what it is on it, and that's said and done. Because earlier he said, for example, some of them are not gonna, if you remove a specific function of it, it's not gonna work. If you remove a user or an owner of it, it's not gonna work. That's why, it's because they have to be perfect. And if they're not, then they have a vulnerability on it, it's gonna get hacked. I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Second question.
Yeah, sure.
Is maybe a little personal, not to take it like that is, but it's related with your journey. Okay.
Okay.
The solo developer. So the thing is, financially wise, if you are independent, you are also your manager, but your sales manager as well. Are you dealing with that? Are you
Yeah, I'm self-employed.
managing and handling this as well? they need to be financially independent? Or,
yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean,
or you are having such an amount of offers that it's a question of discarding, not offering to the market your capabilities, options.
I mean, so you definitely have to have self-ownership of your finances as well. I mean, the solo aspect that I talked about was more focused on solo in terms of solo learning, solo starting the journey, and not going through traditional routes. But yeah, if you're asking me, for example, I'm self-employed. So yeah, I work as a self-employed developer. I work as a contractor for companies. So I'm not directly employed, so to say. And yeah, I have to manage my own finances as well. If that's what you were asking.
Yeah. At the end, you are being your sales manager as well, so you are looking for new opportunities or no, for as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely, yeah. Uh, Actually, funnily enough, the company I am working with right now, for example, the contract is ending like at the end of the month, and afterwards I'm gonna start something new. But yeah, you have to be self-ownership oriented in that aspect as well. But again, the solo aspect that I wanted to emphasize was solo learning. So you don't have to be a contractor like me. You can just be a solo learning and then land a normal employment job with a company and not have to deal with your own finances. That's more of a different choice. But I went with that choice as well.
Yeah, sure. I think the question is more like, how do you find the contract right now? Like when you're running out of a contract for the next month, like how are you finding your next one?
Me personally, through my network, Web3 is I think network is extremely important in Web3. And that's also why I mentioned hackathons, because at hackathons, you will get to meet the people directly, right? You'll get to talk to them. You don't have to chat with them. You get to talk to them. You can make a personal impression of yourself with them. Building a network is extremely important. I think it's very important for other fields as well, but I think it's especially important in Web3. So yeah, I mostly get jobs from my network, but I'm not a freelancer. I don't do jobs every month. Like my contract with that company went for over a year. So yeah, I'm not like doing short-term gigs. I want to work on a project. I want to completely I want to work on a project, start a project, develop it, and finish it. And that most of the times takes way longer. Any more questions? Yeah, sure.
My question is more technical.
Yeah.
Where do the smart contracts run?
Good question.
Like on what computer?
Yeah.
And also, what are the ways to trigger it? Do you trigger automatically? You have to do something?
Yeah, so the smart contracts run on the nodes of the network. So each node has a local instance of the EVM, which is the execution environment. And within that EVM, they run the code. And to execute the code, somebody publishes an intent to the network saying, hey, I'm going to hit this function of that contract. And this is what the storage changes are going to be to the network, to the state. And then that intent gets published. Each node verifies it, runs it locally, and checks that what that user said in terms of the changes to the network are actually correct. So they're run on each node of the network. Yeah, in a virtual environment.
What about like performance? Like, can you build reactive apps with that? In the same way you can do it in the traditional way, in an event-driven style, for example?
No, not really. There always has to be somebody triggering something. It's like, yeah, it's intent-driven. So it only runs if somebody calls a specific function of a smart contract. It doesn't automatically execute. Yeah.
You know,
Is it
Go.
Okay. So you have to build like basically just an automation processor around, which is like triggering another function again on the smart contract.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't automatically run.
Is this function which automatically, like this automation processor, is it like a Lambda function you're like deploying on AWS or so, or is it?
Potentially, yeah, or just a bot that you have, and then whenever you want to execute a certain function, maybe it has to fit certain criteria on the blockchain to execute that function. You can build a bot off-chain, so normal Web2 architecture, run it in AWS, and then that's sort of your automation system. But the blockchain itself is not automated. The code has to be manually triggered to be run.
Actually, Binance has a course on deploying with AWS. So since you've got the option there of deploying with the traditional Web2 platforms.
So,
Yeah.
what are the measures the blockchain have to prevent infinite loops or contracts that trigger infinitely contracts?
Yeah. So each transaction has a certain limit of how much computational power it can use. And there's a computational unit on the EVM and Ethereum, which is called gas, which is an analogy to cars. And each transaction has a gas limit. So you can't run a loop infinitely. And each block is also capped in terms of how much data it can contain. So how much transactions. So and that prevents DOS attacks, right? You can publish or like put a block into the blockchain which has like 1 terabyte, right? And then every node needs to pull that block, and the network gets stuck. So yeah, there are certain measures for preventing that. And also, gas, it costs real money. And to execute code, it costs real money. And that's what the cryptocurrency is used for on Ethereum. It's sort of a currency for computational power. So if you had, or if you were to execute such an infinite loop or hit the gas limit of your transaction, it's actually like you have an economical disincentive to do that. Yeah.
Oh, also hijacking. You have mentioned some languages. You have been mentioning some languages as well. I mean, Viper, Solidity, you have mentioned Go. Which blockchain do you prefer? Ideally, not financially, ideally, and why?
So I built.
Sorry.
No, did you want to add?
Kind of reasons. I mean, speed, simplicity, easy to develop.
Yeah, so me personally, I like to develop on Ethereum because most of the projects, most of the developers are concentrated there, and that makes it way more easy to develop on Ethereum. Ethereum itself is sort of not quite correct because Ethereum is not only one. I mean, Ethereum itself is one blockchain, but the Ethereum space actually is made up by many different blockchains, which all run on the same architecture. And those side chains are called L2s. And the point of these L2s is to make computational power more cost effective because Ethereum and the Ethereum mainnet, the main blockchain network of Ethereum, is very expensive to run code on. So what developers do and projects do is they deploy the code not actually on Ethereum mainnet, but on an L2, which is synced in a certain way with the mainnet. And then you can take the advantage of having more cost-effective or running your code more cost-effectively. One of those networks is, for example, called Arbitrum. I like to develop on Arbitrum. I think most of the liquidity from DeFi is concentrated on Arbitrum as well. One thing that I would like to have though, which might come in the future, is changing the smart contract language for Ethereum to Rust, which now might actually be a reality because Vitalik Buterin, which is kind of the godfather of Ethereum, published a proposal a couple of days ago to swap out the EVM for a different execution environment, which is a radical proposal, but it would allow us to write smart contracts in different languages too. For example, Rust. And Rust has many advantages for smart contracts because it's a very safe language where you have to account for all possible errors that might happen, which is super useful for smart contracts because they're immutable, as Theo already mentioned. So once you deploy them, you can't change them. Although there are mechanisms around updating them, you can't change them. So it's incredibly important that they're written safely. And a different programming language would allow us to do that more effectively.